a big happy new year 2023, and this is Nora the Himalayan rabbit to celebrate the year of the rabbit. Now in the following video I've decided to take it back to basics. It's a new year and there might be a lot of you out there deciding to pick up crochet as your new hobby this year. So I've put all of the beginner techniques in one place. You go from the very beginning on how to hold your hook and your yarn, doing all your stitches, doing a colour change because obviously that's included in this design here where you move from the cocoa to the cream, and also all the stuffing and sewing up instructions as well. I hope you really enjoy making this project. There is a mini available too, so you'll be able to find that. But if you are choosing to learn to crochet for the first time this year, we're here to help. I hope you really enjoy your first few double crochet stitches and a new hobby in 2023.
New year for the 2023 year of the rabbit. This is one video that you can then watch and learn how to make any of the Edwards Menagerie level 1 or level 2 animals. So even though I'm going to be talking specifically about a rabbit in this video, all the techniques actually apply to all different animals. And what we're going to start with is by making a leg. And included in the kit, as with most of the Edwards Menagerie kits, you've actually got enough yarn that you could make 5 legs. You're only going to need 4 for your rabbit, but we can do a practice piece by making 1 extra leg to help you along your way. Now, if you have bought the kit for Nora the Himalayan rabbit specifically, you will have plenty of cream yarn. So I would say what you should use is your cream yarn to make an extra leg. You're not going to need it because ultimately you will be doing these colour change ones, but use your cream yarn to learn all of these techniques to make a leg, because that way you'll have a practice piece that you can put to one side before you go on to actually making your rabbit. So in addition to the yarn that obviously comes with your kit, what you're going to need is a 3mm hook, which is what you would normally use with a double knit weight of yarn. Then you're going to need a sewing up needle, so a metal needle to be able to do your sewing up, some scissors or snips to be able to cut them off at the end, and then a contrast piece of yarn in a bright colour that I'm going to show you how to use as a stitch marker. Then when it comes to the final bits, you're going to need some stuffing as well in order to stuff it. That's what you're going to do, is make it a 3D shape. You can use a recycled polyester stuffing, a pure wool stuffing. There's lots of options available. So let's start from the very, very beginning. What we're going to be talking about is I am a right-handed crocheter. And that means that I will be holding my crochet hook in my right hand. And there's 2 ways of holding your hook. I hold mine overhand like this. So when you see me crocheting in these videos, I'll be holding my hook over the top like that. You can also hold your hook underhand like this. Now, if you have learnt to crochet before at some point in your past and you've learnt it one way or another, stick with the way that you have learnt. There's no real advantage to one over the other. It's just what's most comfortable for you. But what you need to be able to do is to be able to twist your hook right the way from an upwards position to a downwards position really comfortably. That's the most important movement. So whichever one you find easiest to do that in, you can either go overhand or underhand. And then the yarn I'll be holding in my left hand as a right-handed crocheter. Now, if you are a left-handed crocheter, it's exactly the same. You don't have to change anything to the way you do. It's not that you're going to be reading anything in the pattern that ever says left or right. It will always refer to right-handed, your hook hand and your yarn hand, rather than your right hand and your left hand. So there's nothing else that you'll need to do. You don't have to change anything in the patterns. All it means is that as I'm working and crocheting around the circle in this direction, you're just going to be going the other way around with no difference. So what we're going to start by doing is tying a slip knot in our yarn. And to tie a slip knot, you need to make a loop like that. You then put your fingers in through the loop and you grab the tail end of the yarn, but you don't pull it all the way through. Hold the tail like that and the ball of yarn, and then pull that through. And what a slip knot is it's a knot that can go tighter or looser like that, controlled by the tail end of your yarn. So I'll just do that again so you can see that. So make a loop like that on your table, put your fingers in through there, grab the tail end of the yarn and don't bring it right the way through. You hold the 2 ends and bring it through like that. And then you can pop that onto your hook. And you don't want to pull it too tight around your hook. You want it on there so it doesn't fall off, but just pull it close so it's close but not too tight onto that hook. Now, when it comes to holding your hook and your yarn, this is something that will feel really uncomfortable when you begin with if this is totally new to you. It honestly just gets easier with practice. And so what I would say to do if you're totally new to crochet and this is the first time you've ever held yarn, you've ever held a hook, is to practice something called a chain stitch first. So what a chain stitch is you yarn over, and that means grab the yarn with the hook and then turn that hook downwards, and you bring that through the loop that's already on your hook. Now, what I've done is I hold my yarn across my index finger like that in my left hand, in my yarn hand. I'm holding onto my yarn like that, and that means that I'm really doing the movement with my hook because I can grab that yarn with my hook, turn it, and bring it through. Now, people do this in all sorts of ways. I see people that decide to throw their yarn like that before they bring it through. So they're doing it a little bit more like how you might do knitting, that you throw your yarn. Again, I really am from the school of there being no wrong and right. Do what works best for you. So once you've got that slip knot again, which I've just tied there, practice some chain stitch. So all you need to do to practice that is yarn over. So grab that yarn, turn that hook towards you and down, and bring that through the loop that you've already got on the hook. So grab the yarn, through and down and through that loop. This is a chain. Now, what I find makes it easier is if you see as I'm doing this chain here, I'm pinching my crochet, the bit that my tail end of my yarn and the bit that I've already done some stitches on, I'm pinching that between my thumb and my third finger while that index finger's got that yarn. And I find that means that this bit isn't whizzing round my hook. That if you don't hold on to that bit and you try and work these stitches, you'll find that much more difficult. So what's quite key there to getting these hand positions right is pinch onto that tail end and that chain between that third finger and that thumb. And that means that you'll find that much easier to do that movement of grabbing that yarn, turning the hook downwards and bringing it through. So that's a chain stitch. If you are entirely new to crochet, go for that for a while. Do a couple of dozen of these until you feel like you start to get comfortable manipulating your hook and holding on to that with your fingers, knowing that what you can always do after you've done that is pull it backwards and start again. Right, but we're not actually going to be doing a long chain to start our rabbit, because what we're doing is we're crocheting round and round in a non-stop circle. So what we're actually aiming to crochet first is 6 neat stitches in a ring like that. And that's how everything starts. That's how our leg starts. That's how the back of the head starts. That's how the bottom of our body starts, which is what I've got here. And what we need to do to create one of those is in your instruction, it will say begin by double crocheting 6 into a ring. And what you do to do that then is we're going to do 2 chains first. So we've done our slip knot, 2 chains, which is what we've just been doing. So to do a chain, you yarn over, turn that hook downwards and bring that through. 1, yarn over, turn that hook downwards and bring it through. So I've done 2 chains. So I've got my slip knot and 2 chain stitches. And then what I'm going to do is do a British double crochet, or a DC is the abbreviation. And the instruction is to do 6 into a ring. And so what I'm going to do is do 6 of them into that first chain that's closest to my slip knot. Now, this is the one stitch that you need to master in order to make your bunny, or in order to make any of the level 1 and level 2 animals. And the double crochet, what you do, you take your hook, you put it in through that stitch that I said there, right next to your slip knot. You yarn over, so in the same way that we did with your chain. So you grab that yarn and bring that back through that stitch there to the point where you've got 2 loops on your hook like that. Then you yarn over again, so you grab that yarn again like that, turn that hook round and bring that through the 2 loops on your hook. And that is a British double crochet. Now, a word of warning, I am from the UK and all my patterns use British terminology unless stated otherwise. But this is actually a US, so a USA single crochet. We call it a double crochet in the UK. But the stitch that I've just done, that's the one that you're making the whole animal in. It'll be called a double crochet in your pattern, but it is a US single crochet if you've ever learnt using the US terms before. So I've done one of them. I'm now going to go back in and do 5 more until I've got 6 in that ring. So let's go back in again. So your hook goes into that hole there, next to your slip knot. You yarn over. So to do that, you bring your hook underneath and grab that yarn from the back is how I find that fastest, with my hook in a downwards position. Bring it through to the point where I've got 2 loops on my hook. You can see I've turned my hook upwards again. I yarn over by taking that yarn, turn that hook, rotate that downwards towards me, and then bring that through the 2 loops in one motion. So that's 2. Then the same thing again. So in that way, yarn over, through to the point where I've got 2 on my hook, and through, that's 3, in again, that's 4, in again is 5, and this last one I'm going to go really slowly again and take us right through it. And as you can see, this is opened up as we've been working the stitches, but you don't need to worry about that. The way that we've done it means you can pull the tail to close it off afterwards. So let's do our last one, our 6 double crochet. So you take your hook, you go in through that hole, you yarn over, so you grab that yarn. You see I'm bringing my if you hold your yarn like that, I'm bringing my hook underneath to take that yarn and bring it back through the hole to the front of the fabric where I've got 2 loops now on my hook. You yarn over again, turn that hook downwards, and that'll make it easy to bring it through those 2 loops in one motion. And then what you do is you pull the tail end that we set up with that slip knot and chain to begin with tight, and that closes off 6 stitches into a neat circle. And that's a bit like casting on. If you've ever done knitting before, this is where it all starts, and then we're going to be crocheting outwards from these 6 stitches in a ring from now on in. So your next line of instruction, we've got 6 at the moment, and that's going to always be the number in brackets that you have will always sit on that far right hand side of your pattern. So what we're going to do next is to double crochet 2 stitches into each of these 6 stitches to get to 12. So your instruction will say round 1. RND means round 1. DC 2 into the next stitch 6 times, and then it will have the number 12 in brackets. Now, before we were working into one hole, so it's nice and easy to see. Now we're actually going to be working into the stitches, and the stitches are these V's that you can see here. That's a stitch. How you would count your stitches is you don't count this live loop on your hook here. You're going to count that V that it's coming from as your first one. So you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in your ring. So when it comes to actually doing this first round of instruction, where you need to put your hook to begin with is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You go in there beneath both sides of the V like that. So you put your hook in there underneath both sides of that V, and then we're going to work a double crochet in exactly the same way we did before. So through to the point where we've got 2 and through the 2 loops. So that's 1. And I'm going to go back into the same stitch again to do a second one. So I've done 1, I go back in again, and I do a second one. So that's 1 and 2 into that first stitch. Then we move along to the next one. Do you see the next one along? That's the one that I've worked. The next one along is that V there that you can see. I go in there, I work 1, and then I work a second one into that same hole. Then on to the next one, go in there and do 1 and 2. So I've now worked 3 stitches out of my 6, and I've turned them into 6 stitches because I've done 2 into each of them. So I've done 3 times 2, which is 6 so far. Then on to this next one, into that V. So that would be stitch 7 and 8. Then on to this next one, 9 and 10. And then my final one would be 11 and 12. And so long as you've learned how to do the double crochet stitch and you know how to count your stitches, you should from now on be able to gradually progress through that pattern. So let's recap what we've learned so far in terms of counting our stitches. So we should now have 12 stitches in our round because we started with 6 stitches there in that neat closed circle at the beginning, and we've just worked 2 double crochets into each of them to get to 12. So let's count where we are. This loop here, you don't count. So the one that I've just taken off my hook like that, you don't count that one. It's this flat one here would be the first one that you count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stitches in your circle. I hope that is nice and easy for you to see. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Just look at that 12th one. So the one that I guess you're going to be working next can often be a little bit tucked under there, but it is there as a stitch in that circle. So that's your 12. Now, once you know you've completed round 1 and you've got 12 stitches, you don't ever want to have to start again. So this is where I recommend using a stitch marker just to keep track of where you are so you can gradually tick off that round of the pattern. So what I've got here is a contrast piece of yarn, and all I'm going to do is put my hook into that last stitch that I work, so the one that the loop's coming out of, and pull it through like that. Then you can relax. You've got 12 stitches, you can put it down, you can go and make a cup of tea, and then come back to it in order to move on to round 2. So with our 12 stitches done, it's now time to move on to the next round of the pattern, which will get us up to 18 stitches. So what it's going to say is double crochet 1 and then double crochet 2 into the next stitch. So what you're going to do is your next one along, so you can see your next V there that's not been worked, go in and double crochet 1, and then move on to your next stitch along, which is that V there. Go in beneath both sides of the V exactly as we've been doing until now, and do 1, and then back into the same hole again to do another one. So when it says double crochet 1, double crochet 2 into the next stitch, what that means is you do 1 into that stitch, and then you're going to do 1 and 2 into the next one. So 1 into the next stitch, and then 1 and back into the same hole to do 2 into the next one. 1 into the next stitch, and then 1 and 2 into the following one. 1 into the next stitch, and then 1 and 2 into the following one. Then the final set of repeat, which is when you're coming back round to your stitch marker, you'll do 1 into that one, and then your last stitch, you know it's your last stitch because you can see your stitch marker coming up through it. So you go in and work your first double crochet, and then your second one you're going to do into that same stitch because it's an increase, it's a 2 into the same stitch. So you go in and do a second one, and then to keep a track of where you are, go down and bring up that yarn through that stitch in the same way. And then you can stop again and count to 18 to make sure that we're still on track. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 stitches in our ring. So that is how you increase. That's how you make this style of crochet get bigger. And that really is the theory of how everything is created, is if you're adding 6 stitches into every round. So we started with 6, if you think in our neat circle, we went to 12, then we went to 18. So if you're adding 6 stitches evenly into each round, what you actually get is a big flat hexagon of fabric like that on the bottom. It doesn't actually become 3D until we stop doing those even increases. And that's what we're about to do next with our foot. So your next round of instruction will just say DC after it. And what it means, if it doesn't give you a specific instruction to either do them into the same stitch or how many to do, it just means to do 1 into each of them all the way around that round until we get back to the other side. So when it says rounds 3 to 6, DC, and then it says 4 rounds in brackets, what that means is for the next 4 rounds, so for the next 4 times all the way around the edge, 4 rotations back to your stitch marker, you're just going to put 1 double crochet into each of those stitches. So all you need to do is go around your circle, putting 1 double crochet into each stitch. And if you are a beginner, I would say what a great thing to do is just make sure you count. At the point at which you get back to your stitch marker, make sure you count how many you've got so you know that you are sticking on that 18 and you're not gaining or losing any as you go round. So we're going to go right the way around the edge like that. So, and obviously I am going to go fast at this stage because we have learned that double crochet. If you want to go back and obviously look at that double crochet again, just go back in the video. So I've gone round once, I'm going to knit down and pull that stitch marker up with me. Check that I've got 18 again, so count backwards, check you've got 18, and then you're ready to go on to the next one. So that's my first of 4 rounds, just doing 1 into each done. That's the third one. And then the last time round, and then it's time to learn something new, because what we've done so far then is we increase, so we added in stitches by doing 2 double crochets into the same stitch. That makes it get bigger until we had 18 stitches. That was making a flat hexagon until we decided to stop doing increases and just do 1 into each stitch. Now, as you can see, as soon as you do 1 into each stitch, that's when it becomes 3D. So we crocheted outwards and then upwards once you just put 1 into every stitch. And this is where I'd like to talk for the first time about right side and wrong side. So what we've made so far is this little cup, and there are 2 definite sides to this piece that look quite different. Now, the side that I've got here is the right side, and what you should be able to see on the right side is, number 1, your tail end shouldn't be on your right side, and as you look at the piece like that and you're crocheting, you should be able to see the lines horizontally like that up the fabric. If you have a quick look at the other side, this is the wrong side. Your tail end will be on the wrong side, and it generally looks messier, and you should see, my eye sees diagonal verticals when I look at this side, rather than those obvious straight horizontal lines. That is your wrong side. Now, this side will be on the inside of your animal and the inside of every part. But it's very easy to accidentally start to get this bit on the outside when you are crocheting, but it's easily fixed. So if right now you've crocheted up to this point in the pattern and yours looks like this, what you need to change is the way that you're holding your crochet, because what you're probably doing is going into the inside like that to work your stitches. All you need to do, if yours looks like that and your wrong side's on the outside, is flip your piece. So put your hook in like that, flip your piece inside out like that, and from now on in, what you must always make sure you're doing is the next stitch that you're crocheting should be closest to your body without the crochet piece in between. So the next stitch that you're always working, whether you're right-handed or left-handed, should be the closest to your body as you're working, and the piece should be sitting on the other side. So if you find that you've got crochet in between you and the next stitch that you're working, you're likely to be doing it inside out. So just flip it like that. And from now on in, make sure that you're keeping that stitch that you're working next closest to your body with the work facing away from you. So you don't need to start again. Don't worry about that at all. Just flip that piece and carry on from now on in. So what we're going to learn now is how to make it get smaller, because how you make a shape like this, like a leg, is you're going out to that circle. We've become 3D as we've just done 4 rounds without anything in, and now we're going to do a decrease to make it get smaller again as we head up that leg. And so to do our decrease, it's called a double crochet 2 together. And we've got 18 at the moment. We need to go back down to 12. So what that means we need to do as a pattern is to double crochet 1 into there, and then we're going to double crochet 2 together. So we're going to turn those 2 stitches back into 1. So do a double crochet as normal first. So a double crochet 1, and then a double crochet 2 together. So to do that, rather than going underneath the whole V, as we have been doing until now, we're actually going to come up the middle of the V like that from the front, then back down and do the same thing on the next one. So back down and get the same front of the next stitch. So what you've actually got is 2 halves of the next 2 stitches, and then double crochet through those 2 halves. So just as we have been doing, yarn over, bring that through those 2 halves to the point where you've got your 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and through those 2 loops in one motion, and that's how it gets smaller again. So let's do that really slowly all the way around this round so you've got it. So we're going to do a normal double crochet first. So a normal double crochet, as we have been doing, you're going in beneath both sides of that V. So that's a normal double crochet. Then a DC 2 tog or a double crochet 2 together, which is a decrease. We go up the middle of the next V like that. Back down and up the middle of the following one, like that. Then yarn over and come through those 2 halves, and then yarn over and finish the stitch off. And that is a double crochet 2 together. So on to the next one. Be careful when you're going on to the next one that, as you can see, if I pull that up there, you can see that I've worked that stitch to do that decrease. It's going to be that stitch there that I'm going into next. So there's a normal one, then a double crochet 2 together, the front half, back down, front half of the next one, double crochet through them, then a normal one again, then a decrease, so front half, and double crochet through them. And this style of double crochet 2 together means that you're not going to get a lump in the surface of your fabric. It's actually invisible really on the right side of the fabric. It's only on the wrong side that you'll be able to see it. So we'll take a look at that in a second. So when it comes to getting back towards your stitch marker, you should have 3 stitches left for your final repeat. So we'll do a normal one in there, and then a double crochet 2 together. So front half of this one, front half of your last one, and then you yarn over through those, finish the stitch off, and remember to bring up your stitch marker because that's marking the last one in that round. So all you're going to be doing now is actually you're going back to just making it 3D. So we've done the one bit of decreasing you do for your legs. You're now just going to be putting 1 stitch into each of those stitches as you go up the length of that leg. And by the time you finish that, you will have made and crocheted your first thing, which would be a leg. So there's one final thing for you to learn before you've learned absolutely everything to be able to go off and make your rabbit. And that is how to do a colour change. Now, to do a colour change, what you need to do is get the colour that you're going to be swapping to. So go in like that into the next stitch along. Grab the yarn that you're using, so your first colour, and bring it through to the point where you've got 2 loops on your hook as part of your normal double crochet stitch. And then all you need to do is get your yarn that you're swapping to and finish off that stitch with that new colour. And then from then on in, your first stitch that you go into next would be the first stitch in that new colour. So you'd go in that next stitch along like that, and you'd work it in cocoa. Now on this rabbit, you're doing a really straightforward colour change from one to the other. So all you'd be able to do at that point that you've swapped colour is you could snip off your cream yarn like that. You don't need to tie in or knot any ends at all. You can just tuck those inside and then you can carry on crocheting with your next colour. But I'll just show you that again so you've got it. So say I'm going to be swapping back from my cocoa, which in reality, once you start your proper legs for your rabbit will be what you're doing. So in the head, you'll be swapping from your cream to your cocoa, whereas in your legs, you'll be starting your cocoa and swapping up to your cream. So say I'm in cocoa, I'm going to swap back to cream. I go in the next stitch along that I'm working, yarn over to the point where I've got 2 loops on my hook as part of my normal double crochet stitch. Then I'll just get my cream that I'm going to, finish off that stitch like that. Pull them a little tight if you want to, so they're nice and neat. So just pull those ends short, but there's no need to sew them in or knot them in. And then go on to the next stitch over, and that would be your first one in your cream like that. And it really is that easy between the 2 colours, especially in a design like this where you can just cut off the other colour and keep going in your new colour. So go away and make your parts. You're going to be making 4 legs, a body, and what this is here is this is your centraliser point. So what you're going to be doing with the centraliser point is it will help us with sewing up. You've got your 2 ears, and you've got your tail as well as your head. Now, just a quick one on centraliser points, actually, just to show you how to do that, is when you're going along and you're crocheting in your pattern, what it will say is to place a centraliser, and it's really just to identify a stitch for yourself when we come back to it. So what it will say is to double crochet 2 together, like that. So it'll be usually sitting on a decrease when we put one in, yarn over and through like that. And then all you need to do is so this is a lobster clasp centraliser, so you can put it in and we can just remove it at the end. You could always do it with a contrast piece of yarn if you wanted to. Is all you do is you pop that in around that stitch like that, leave that in as we go along, and that means that when it comes to sewing up at the end, you'll know where the centre of your tummy is in order to line it up with your head. So make all your body parts, and then it's time for sewing up. So then you're going to need a wool needle, and you're going to need some stuffing, as well as a length of black thread in order to put your rabbit together. So when you're finishing off a part when you've been crocheting, at the point at which you work the last stitch like that, all you need to do is snip your yarn that you've been using. Leave yourself a long length on, because we'll use that to sew up. So don't cut the end really close to the piece that you've crocheted. Leave yourself a reasonable length on, and then you just pull that loop like that through, and that fastens that off. That means that can't unravel at all, ready for you to start stuffing and sewing up. So I've done exactly the same thing with all these bits here. So put a little bit of stuffing into my head. And you don't want to be putting too much stuffing in. You want the shapes to obviously have 3D shape, but you don't want them to feel too firm. So my big advice would be to go easy on your stuffing. Don't be tempted to keep going and going and going and putting as much in as you can. You won't actually need too much. So we've got the stuffing in the head like that, onto the body. And the shape that we've created with the body, it is a pear shape, but it's also asymmetric. You have got a tummy at the front. It isn't the same shape all the way around. And that's why using that marker can be really helpful, because you will know exactly where the centre of your tummy is like that when we sew up. So I've stuffed my head, I've stuffed my body. The final thing to do is to put a little bit of stuffing into the bottom of the legs. And when it comes to stuffing the legs, the only piece that you are going to stuff will be this end here, the bulbous piece where we had the increasing. So what you need to do is push the stuffing in and down. Use the heel end of your hook. That's the best tool that you've got in order to get that stuffing right the way down to the bottom. Like that. Push that down, and then you don't want there to be any stuffing in this bit here, just in that bottom end. So stuff all of those. Right, and now it's time to sew our parts together. So using a wool needle, what we're going to do first is gather the stitches together, and we're going to start by doing the ones at the front of the nose. So thread that long length that you left on the last stitch onto a wool needle, and gather the stitches together just by doing a running stitch in and out through that last round of stitches. So you see you've got your V's there, which you'd normally crochet on your last round of stitches. Just do a running stitch in and out through the centre of those stitches like that. And that will gather those together really neatly like that. And then to fasten off an end, best thing to do is to go in and around a stitch a couple of times. And it being a stitch, stick within the colour that you're using. So we're sewing up in the cocoa, stick in the cocoa, and through. So we're going to do the same thing on the body. Gather the stitches on the top of the body like that. And then it comes to sewing our head onto our body. So take your body,
and line your head up to go on top like that. So use your centraliser point to mark the centre of the body, line your head up with it facing you, and then tip your head backwards like that. And that's how I will then take my long length that's come off the bottom of the body, double check yourself again, line that back up with that centraliser point like that. And then all you need to do is sew around with stitches on either side of the front and back to fix that head in position. Then fasten off a stitch in the same way. So head and body attached. Now for some limbs. So when you've made the arms, if you are doing exactly this rabbit and you've got a colour change in there, you will have a colour change line like that. And we want to keep those to the back when we are sewing them up. So turn that over and using your length on the end, sew the end together flat. This is going to make it much easier for you to be able to sew it into position, is the fact that you're not sewing something 3D, you are sewing a flat line of stitches onto the body. So sew the end flat like that, and then position that either side of the head. So what you're going to be aiming for ultimately is for them to be 3 or 4 stitches apart in the centre like that. So line it in, use your centraliser on your tummy as a guide, and then sew that into that line between the neck and the body. And that will further reinforce that head so it sits up nice and straight on the top of the body. So do one side, flip it over, and then sew the other side. It's exactly the same with the other side. There we go. So the 2 front legs are in. Now for the bottom legs. And key to the bottom legs is the fact that we haven't got any stuffing in this part of the leg, just in the bottom. And what we need to now do is sew them at the right angle so that your rabbit or animal will sit forwards and sit up and self-support. And what's key to that is number one, not having stuffing in those legs, but also making sure that we sew them on at the right angle. So imagine a straight line coming down the centre of the body from your centraliser point into the middle of your ring like that. So that's your straight line there in your fabric. What we're going to do is sew our legs on the lines that divide the bottom into thirds like that. So we're going to sew one there and one there. So they'll cross when they're sitting backwards, but that means that when they're forwards, they'll splay like that. And that way your animal will sit up and self-support. So perfect for if it's going to sit on a shelf, if it's going to sit on a mantelpiece, if it's going to sit in a nursery, your rabbits will be able to sit up nicely with their hands on their knees. So sew it closed in exactly the same way. Look for that colour change like we did before. Make sure your colour changes to the back and sew your legs onto that line. So we've got all 4 limbs and head in place. Now it's time for the fun bit, the finishing touches. So let's do the tail first, because that's a nice, easy piece. The best way that I find to get the tail in the right place is to now sit your rabbit up. So exactly as I said, we've got those at that right angle of splitting that bottom into thirds. Your rabbit will sit up like that. I'm going to push a tiny bit of stuffing into my tail. And I've not left myself a long enough length on here, so let me show you how to rejoin yarn. So say you've done as I have done here and I've not left a long enough length to sew up. All I would do is I'll gather my stitches with this bit. So I'll gather my stitches like that so that the end is closed, and I'll fasten that off. And then to rejoin myself a piece to be able to sew up, cut yourself a length to sew up with. And then to reattach that in, I'm going to want it at the bottom because I'm going to do my tail this way up with the pointy bit at the top. So all I'll do to reattach a bit of yarn to sew up, bring it in and through and around a stitch. And then the same thing on the other side. And that will have really firmly reattached a piece of yarn so that I can sew it up. So sit it down so you can see where it's going to end up. And position that in like that. I'm going to sew it in quite an upright position. So once I've sewn on one side, I'm going to go across and sew on the other side like that. And then in and through. And snip that off. Right, time for the ears. So the ears, we've got no stuffing going into the ears. And we're going to be sewing on with the cream. So tuck all your ends in because you're not going to need those. Tuck those inside. And then what you need to do is pinch your ears together like that before we put them into place. So pinch the ends together and sew them through. Like that. And then position them on the top. Now, a tip here is if you're new to sewing up 3D crochet like this, what you might want to use is some blocking pins. So this is a blocking pin. And what that would mean is what you could do is position that one like that. So position that into place while you have a look at the other one and decide the personality of your rabbit. Then you can come back and sew them on together. But if you're feeling confident and you've done a few, then just go straight for it, attaching your ear on. The hardest bit is putting the first one on because then the second one is easy because you'll just be matching that from the other side. So secure that first one into place. Don't skimp on stitches at this stage. I'm going to put a couple more stitches into the back to make sure they stand up nice and tall. Like that. Then with your second one, most important thing is that you try and balance off that first one. So pinch and sew it in the same way that I did the first time. And then count you can eyeball or roughly count the stitches between that side to get them in the right place, because obviously what you want to do is you can use the back to have a look at that as well, is you want to make sure that that distance between that leg to that ear is about the same on both sides. Now remember that it's not completely symmetrical, so for anyone looking for total mathematical symmetry, won't find it here. We worked in a spiral, so you will never get it completely symmetrical. So it's a mixture of art and science, I think, this one, when you're putting on the pieces at the end. So go through the back first, like that. And I'm going to flip over and do my fronts. Go and snip off your ends. Now it's time for the final touch, which is the nose and the ears. And I'm just going to use a length of black double knit yarn, which is the same thickness that I've been crocheting this in, to do those eyes. If you're using safety eyes, you must remember to put those in before you close off the nose. Nora's looking fantastic. Right, so here we go. A length of black thread in which to do our final touches of putting on our eyes and our nose. So bring your yarn up into her face to where you want that first eye to be. And then I'm going to come down in one go and across. There we go, like that. And use the stitches as a guide. So what I've done there is track that one across on that round and in. And then I'm just going to draw a little nose as a triangle. And then down to finish. And with that, Nora the Himalayan rabbit is finished. My first make of 2023. Maybe it's your first ever crochet make. I hope you've really enjoyed the video so that you can find all the tips in one place. All you do now is you unclip that centraliser like that, and Nora is complete and ready for your shelf. Happy New Year.